Powerful 6.7 magnitude earthquake struck Indonesia's Central Sulawesi on Tuesday, rattling Palu and nearby areas. Emergency crews at Tadulako University inspected damage after the tremor disrupted an elementary school graduation ceremony. Head of Palu's Search and Rescue Office, Mo Rizal, said all attendees escaped safely but urged residents to remain vigilant for aftershocks. Authorities reported scattered damage and at least 8 injuries in Sigi Regency, including 2 serious cases. Emergency teams were quickly deployed to assess infrastructure and assist evacuations. Palu lies along the Pacific Ring of Fire, a region prone to seismic activity. The city still remembers the devastating 2018 quake and tsunami that caused widespread destruction and loss of life. Israel's Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich declared Tuesday that the Hebron Protocol, signed in 1997 under the Oslo peace process, has been effectively cancelled. Smotrich said the move ends a Palestinian administrative control over planning and construction in the Jewish part of Hebron, calling it a step of practical sovereignty and a correction of what he described as a historic mistake. But Israel's foreign ministry quickly contradicted him, insisting the Hebron Agreement remains in place. Officials clarified that recent decisions only concern planning and construction in Jewish communities and heritage sites, citing years of non-cooperation with the Hebron municipality. Hebron, sacred to Jews, Christians and Muslims as the burial site of biblical patriarchs, remains a flashpoint in the Israel-Palestinian conflict. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in Geneva on Tuesday, where he was greeted by Swiss President Guy Parmelin. The meeting marked a symbolic stopover as Modi prepared to travel to Evian-les-Bains, France, for the G7 summit. Footage showed the two leaders exchanging greetings and walking together before Modi continued his journey. The visit underscores India's expanding diplomatic presence at major international forums, with Modi expected to join discussions on global security, trade and cooperation alongside G7 leaders. The summit runs from June 15 to 17 in Evian-les-Bains, just across Lake Geneva. Vietnamese Prime Minister Lome was warmly welcomed in Kazan Tuesday by students and experts waving Russian, Vietnamese and Tatarstan flags. Footage showed the Prime Minister receiving flowers and greeting his fellow citizens outside the courtyard by Marriott Kazan Kremlin before entering the hotel. The visit comes ahead of the Russian-ASEAN summit set for June 17 to 19 in Kazan. The gathering will bring together leaders from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which includes 11 members ranging from Vietnam and Indonesia to Thailand, the Philippines, and Timor-Leste. The summit is expected to focus on strengthening political, economic, and cultural ties between Russia and Southeast Asia. Turkey's Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan pledged continued support for resolving the Ukraine crisis during talks with Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow on Tuesday. Fidan said Ankara is ready to contribute to mediation efforts, stressing that the war fuels instability in the region and must end quickly. He highlighted growing Turkey-Russia ties, citing major trade, energy and logistics projects, while noting discussions would also cover the Caucasus, the Middle East, and Africa. Lavrov praised Ankara's role and pointed to expanding economic cooperation. The meeting follows 3 rounds of security consultations earlier this year involving Russia, Ukraine, and the US in Abu Dhabi and Geneva. The Kremlin has dismissed reports of a possible meeting between Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Russian President Vladimir Putin at the G7 summit in France. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said Tuesday there had been no official invitation and no functioning communication channels between Moscow and Kyiv. He added that Putin has previously welcomed dialogue if Zelenskyy was ready for serious talks, but insisted such discussions would take place in Moscow, not abroad. Peskov also noted that dates have not yet been set for the next visit of U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, citing preparations for the upcoming U.S.-Iran memorandum signing in Switzerland. Russia, Ukraine and the U.S. have held several rounds of trilateral negotiations since early 2026, but no comprehensive settlement has been reached. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has reaffirmed the importance of ties with Nepal during talks in Beijing with his counterpart Shishir Kanal. The meeting Monday marks the first high-level visit to China by Nepal's new Rashtriya Swatantra Party government following its landmark election victory earlier this year. Footage showed the two ministers shaking hands before sitting down with officials for discussions. Wang Yi said Nepal holds a key place in China's neighborhood diplomacy, part of Beijing's broader push for stronger regional partnerships. The visit follows Kanal's trip to India earlier this month, outlining Nepal's new foreign policy priorities. The talks highlight China's ongoing efforts to deepen engagement with South Asian neighbors through diplomacy and economic cooperation. African leaders and aviation officials meeting in Lome on Monday called for urgent cuts to aviation taxes and fuel costs to boost connectivity and trade across the continent. Togo's President Faure Gnassingbe warned that open skies mean little if tickets remain unaffordable, calling overpriced fares a barrier for entrepreneurs, tourism, and families. Rwanda's President Paul Kagame criticized Africa's high air travel taxes, saying they undermine predictable rules for a single market. Officials noted that most African nations still import jet fuel, with Nigeria being a rare exception. The 5-day African Air Transport Convention and Expo, themed One African Sky, brings together over 500 delegates to push the single African air transport market from rhetoric to reality. Ghana will host the Next Steps conference in Accra from June 17 to 19, focusing on implementing the UN resolution that recognizes the transatlantic slave trade and racialized enslavement of Africans as crimes against humanity. Foreign Minister Samuel Okudzeto Ablakwa called the gathering a strategic turning point, stressing the need to move from recognition to concrete action. Delegates from the African Union, CARICOM, North America and Latin America will join European partners to advance reparatory justice and accountability. Ablakwa highlighted cooperation with French President Emmanuel Macron, who pledged support for a scientific commission on slavery and the return of colonial artifacts. The UN resolution, adopted in March, was long championed by Ghana and its allies. The Accra summit aims to define frameworks and pathways for reparatory justice in the post-resolution phase. China has voiced support for the swift restoration of safe navigation through the Strait of Hormuz following reports of a US-Iran Phase 1 peace memorandum. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said Tuesday that Beijing is in constant communication with all parties to safeguard Chinese vessels and crew, stressing that free passage benefits the entire international community. The comment came after Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif announced a US-Iran deal including an immediate halt to military operations across multiple fronts such as Lebanon. US President Donald Trump confirmed the agreement, saying the naval blockade on Tehran would be lifted. Iran's Supreme National Security Council said the memorandum will be formally signed June 19. Lin added that Lebanon's sovereignty must be respected, urging all sides to implement ceasefire arrangements. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced Monday that the first round of negotiations for a final agreement with Washington will begin after the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding in Switzerland this Friday. The deal, confirmed by both Tehran and Washington, is expected to include a 60-day ceasefire, reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, lifting of the US naval blockade, sanctions relief, and talks on Iran's nuclear program. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif described the agreement as a permanent end to fighting on all fronts, including Lebanon, though Israel has said it is not party to the deal. US President Donald Trump posted, "Let the oil flow," signaling the strait will reopen Friday. Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister added that talks will continue during the 60-day period to shape a wider settlement.